welcome to all who could join us for today's session of our talk series. And we are very happy to have with us the founders of StudioPOD, architect Mahesh Waghdhare, architect Mansi Sahu, and architect Sarfaraz Momin. So thank you for being with us today. Since 2013, StudioPOD has been working on projects of varying urban scales in multiple cities across India and the UAE. And the projects span across various disciplines, including urban planning, urban design, transport planning, campus planning, landscape urbanism, and streetscapes. Mahesh sir holds a master's in urban design from the University of California, Berkeley, and bachelor's in architecture from the SIRJJCOA College of Architecture. Mansi ma'am has a master's of science in architecture and urban design from Columbia University in New York and a bachelor of architecture from University of Mumbai. And Sarfaraz sir graduated from University of Michigan with a master's in urban design and has also a bachelor's degree in architecture from SIRJJCOA College of Architecture. So the three of them are also part of the technical expert team to the United States Trade and Development Authority to support development of 3 smart cities in Andhra Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and Rajasthan. And they have presented as smart city planning experts in seminars, summits, and workshops. So we are today they will be talking to us on the topic of urban design practice in India, and we're looking forward to the presentation. And we also have with us our principal, Professor Rajiv Mishra. So thank you for being with us, sir.
Yeah. No. I'm here because of Sarfaraz, Mansi, and Mahesh. I'm looking forward to their presentation.
Yes, sir. So I think we can start with the presentation now.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Well, thank you, Ayushi, for that introduction, and thank you, the Student Council, and thank you, sir, for having us today. I think it's been something which is really dear to us, coming back and talking to the students at JJCOA ourselves. We would have loved to be present there, and hopefully sometime when this whole COVID situation gets over, we'll come in and have a more interactive session. But till then, these sessions are always heartening to kind of have some kind of a link again and talk to you and start engaging. So I'll just share my screen right now. Today's discussion, what we thought we would do is more of a journey of what we have gone through of setting up StudioPOD and our learnings, good and bad, of how the urban design practice has been running in the past 7-8 years for us. So I'll just share my screen. Hold on. Cool. So yeah. So the discussion today, as I said, is about our journey itself at StudioPOD. So just to give a background, we three of us, Sarfaraz, myself, Mansi, all three of us, as introduced by Ayushi in the beginning, we did our undergrads back in Mumbai in architecture. Sarfaraz and myself at JJ had all those cool fun memories, the SEM hall and the canteen and the studio spaces as well. So all the architecture, the college itself, and then we all of us worked at different points in time for 2 to 3 years in India, and then went for a master's. And then after working there for almost 5 to 6 years, Sarfaraz and me, and Mansi also was there for a couple of years after a master's, and she was in Africa for some time. We all came back to Mumbai, including Shraddha, Rahul, who are also were working in the studio. Shraddha was working in the studio sometime, and Rahul is still there. And all of us, when we came back to Mumbai, we kind of put together the team at StudioPOD and not only us, but as we grew, like-minded people, urban designers, planners, who have done the masters in London, in other parts of Europe. And we all came back and set up this practice at StudioPOD, and now we have almost 20 of us who have done.
Wow! You have a great team, yeah? That's great.
Yeah. So we are a mix of urban designers, planners, landscape architects, transport planners, and this is a little bit older snapshot of all the people. But at the core of the whole thing, even though we are architects, planners, designers, and through all these different universities, Indian and abroad, the heart of it is like all of our have our own personality, right? Whether it's a cyclist or a photographer or a rail enthusiast in Rahul, who came back specifically to work with the rail authorities in India, and he's been up till now an amazing kind of a transport led for person for us. So all of those personal kind of traits which are there can come out in our profession as well. And that's what our whole thing. When we came back, we did not start a practice which was like our initial names, right? We wanted to do something which is people-oriented design. That's what StudioPOD stands for, and we do spend a lot of time together, a bit too much. That's different times in the studio. This is the first studio that we were the left hand side, the bottom picture which is there. This was in Matunga, and now we are in Bandra, the top right. We have a good, amazing terrace office which overlooks the heritage station of Bandra. So we do enjoy a lot of each other's time. And now in COVID, obviously everybody is working online, but we do miss the whole studio experience and environment which is there. So as I said, it's all about the practice itself has been set up on this whole philosophy about a people-oriented design, about what healthy lifestyles mean, what is about family spaces coming into public spaces, what is the diversity in relationships as well, the idea of walkability, what we will talk more as well as we go along. All of this is all about people, right? It's not about an architecture building. It's not about one particular design. It's not about one great sketch that one of us would draw out and everybody will follow. It's not like this. That is a very collaborative people effort that is there, which comes from the studio to the design part itself as well. So what we do at our studio is we are very proud of setting up this practice, which is primarily focusing on planning and urban design. We also do some large-scale landscape works, which is coming off as an offshoot from the urban design practice that we have. Architecture also is not a whole lot that we are doing right now, but we do kind of residential townships and kind of mix of public buildings in that. But again, all of these architecture also are collaborations with larger team members, which are there with these firms or individuals. We have a very good portfolio of transportation, which also comes together from a lot of these large-scale city projects. And every part of these are tied up with the whole idea of sustainability. At the same time, the research is also ingrained in these processes itself. It's not something which is a separate department or separate wing of research, which stands on its own. Each one of our projects go through that amount of kind of query and research work that kind of informs the project itself. So today we are just going to talk about this journey of ours. How did we start after spending a few years outside in the US and other places, having experienced more than like 3 of us when we started off had like at least 15 odd countries that we had worked on apart from India. But when we came back, there was this whole myth about what urban planning and design was, right? And some of these myths started coming about immediately when we kind of started formulating ourselves and how would we do urban planning, right? There were comments given to us like, you need to focus on 3 BHK interiors. You'll get
This is
how will you earn money, right? So this is what you'll start off with. You'll have like 1 or 2 BHK interiors that you need to do to at least get some money rolling, right? What is planning urban design in India? It's like it's all when you grow and be something big, that time you start. And then obviously
I think I went through this the most. Sarfaraz and Mahesh were already married with kids, and I was already 30, and everybody was like, "Don't start your business right now. Start it after you get married. Start it where you go, and don't find business partners first. Find a life partner first." And it was just there was a lot of noise in our background when we were starting this. But I think our focus was always we have nothing to lose. So why not start an urban design practice? So we had to fight through a lot of this noise. Go ahead, Mahesh.
And then obviously when we do urban planning, there are a lot of big architects and names, right? Like obviously a lot of credit to them, but how do you start if you want to do kind of large scale planning? If you're not an established architect, you don't have any connections, how will you start any kind of planning and urban design, right? There's no hope for you guys. You what are you talking? You can't even get going. And obviously, you don't have any project experience on the firm's name. We have our individual kind of resumes that we had built over years, but you need to do some pro bono projects to build a portfolio, right? To show what you're doing as you move along. So all of this noise that Mansi also sings was all there in the background. And we started off StudioPOD, and the first thing fortunately, somehow we got a client who was looking at a particular site in Gurgaon, which was a very big master planning exercise for more than 1,000 acres. And he was working with the government, and he wanted to put together a pitch which he could show the government. And he had some wild ideas. Why don't you kind of put a golf course or some kind of high-end housing and overall amazing master plan, and when can this be ready? And we were like very enthusiastic and bunch of kind of starters, right? And we'll get this going and we'll get it tomorrow itself. So we went back to the drawing board, did our quick optioneering that we would do, and then came back with these amazing set of sketches. We thought, oh wow, this is really cool, right? And then the client kind of saw this and, oh, this won't work here. This is very Western for us. We can't just kind of come in and show these things and get these ideas. How would you kind of do that, right? So we kind of stepped back and we thought amongst ourselves that we need to really not skip the process in the whole eagerness of doing kind of these projects, right? We have to decipher our way of doing things, the Indian way of doing things. We have to kind of look at whatever learnings that we have. We have to kind of show that process. You cannot avoid that process and directly jump to what the final thing is, right? You have to show the process to the client also, whoever you're talking to. And it's not like a very highly technical thing. It's about taking on board with communication of how you do these. And then again, obviously using a knowledge over the whatever 7, 8 years or 10 years of experience that we have had in that time, kind of really how well you communicate, whether it's oral communication or whether it's graphic communication, how well you communicate your ideas to whoever you're explaining to, right? So this is what we really understood in the beginning itself, that you need to kind of look at relevant solutions from our perspective, our context. We cannot go and jump to something which anybody would say, and oh, this is not coming from the ground, coming from the context itself. This is, we always find this very fascinating as such. This is a award-winning NID kind of product by Vikram Panchal, which is basically something which is as simple as a construction worker would use to carry bricks and construction stuff around. And how could you kind of simplify something as simple as this and put it out in context on anything that you do, right, in terms of design and planning. So we also kind of retreated and went back amongst ourselves and kind of said that we'll follow the process. Let's not jump it. We have to kind of look at the overall thing, whatever the project scale is, big or small. We have to plan for resiliency into our projects, about sustainability to longer term, whether it's environment, whether it's ecological, whether it's economical, all of those parts. We have to plan for resiliency. Connect efficiency is about transportation, infrastructure, human scale, which is very important when we look at these large scale projects, and even in architecture projects, right? We always get lost into the design idea of what a building is, but then what a human scale really means. And when you do large plans, you have to kind of phase out and invest in the right time at the right place and in the right part of the project itself as well. And at the end of it, all of it has to be done together with larger teams. Even in architecture projects, we have not only the architecture designer, we have an array of consultants and technical experts and structural engineers and whatnot to kind of come up with the whole idea that you are looking at and execute it. So at the planning level, it becomes much bigger. You have stakeholders who are not in the discipline. You have to talk to politicians. You have to talk to all kinds of people to kind of come about a particular strategy that would work. So we went back and just kind of reiterated some of these. And what we'll show right now is just some of the work that we are doing and what are the learnings for each of these that we are looking at.
So Mahesh, just one, sorry to interrupt you. It would be, it would be great if we can actually see faces. I know we can't meet you guys in people, but, rather than seeing names pop up, if some of you can switch on your camera, it's just a better conversation to have. So yeah, we love seeing amazing faces and people. So we'd love to, connect with you guys. So whoever can, please do switch on. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So it's all about these larger level stories, right, that we found out when we were looking at any of our works that we're working on. Like we always thought that there's something larger in perspective. So we started this Very interesting story, which calls the story of Cascading tanks. This is basically the eastern part of India, where the entire towards the Bay of Bengal, the eastern ghats going towards the Bay of Bengal. So this is the Tamil Nadu and larger South India as such. So there are more than like 300,000 tanks, which are these tanks connecting each other towards the Bay of Bengal. And what they really do is we obviously have all these river systems connecting to the Bay of Bengal in this part. So all of these tanks were built man-made, and some of them date back to 300 BC. And it was a very interesting, intricate network of water bodies that used to connect to each other and over a period of time connect to the river itself. So the idea was when the monsoons happen and the rivers are not all perennial, right? They have water at that time, but they give water to these tanks, and this is where the storage system used to be built up. And it was very well managed, like 2 to 3 villages used to manage one particular tank. And everything was quite decentralized. And so the entire water kind of utilization and taking care of the water was very decentralized. So everybody used to take care of the water bodies for the drinking purpose, for the utilization of the farming and everything else. The 2 different tanks were used. So the very sustainable self-contained system which was there. And this is how, if you just kind of systematically see how the entire water system was connected to the sea itself. And then over time, when we kind of developed over a period of 100, 200 years, in the last 50, 60 years more so, let's say, a lot of these tanks were filled up with unchecked development, right? When floodplains were being blocked. And then the monsoons happen, obviously flooding happens, and we have had more and more of these situations happening in recent times. This is when in Tamil Nadu in 2015 this happened. A lot of loss of life and businesses and all kind of big impact, right? It was a very big kind of a realization that we are having recently. And at the same time, we have a different water crisis. This is in northern India, where this is an image from NASA on the left-hand side top, where you see there is a depleting groundwater resource of almost to a meter every year that the water depletion is happening. And we are like fighting for water. This also happens in the Vidarbha, mid-Maharashtra area also, as well as a lot of places in the central Maharashtra, central India, where we are we don't have enough water, which is being reached to all the people itself. So there are 2 different polarizing conditions of how water is being is creating a havoc at some places. At some places there's no water, right? So in terms of when we're using these kind of information, and how do you look at it when we have projects of large scale in planning? So this is one of the projects we're working on currently in Pune. It's a large township where when we got to get to this particular development, which is in Pune, in Khardi. This on the circle over here marks the site. But when we look at this whole development, it's a larger ecosystem which is prevailing, which is again a part of whole ravine ecological system, the water bodies, the greens, how the entire connection of the larger scale is happening to this particular place. And when we looked at it much more carefully, we could see that the entire topography was well kind of established and towards the river as these small little ravines and rivulets kind of formulated on the side, giving the topography on the side, being shaped by them, and reach the river itself, right? And amazing views if you see these aerial drones, these green paths leading to the river. So when we actually went in and did the whole master plan, we made sure that these rivers and kind of ravine areas which were there, small little streams, were maintained and enhanced on site itself. And then if you look at any kind of a master plan, the open spaces are always central to the whole plan, right? But we over here made a plan which was very much ecologically kind of resilient in that sense, and had an open-ended plan where the development was all not central to the open space was not central over here. It was more kind of towards the river going down on both sides, but development went around it in that. So we created a whole heart of a complex, but the open spaces always were kept kind of respecting the current topography and ecology of the site. And then the layers of storm water, treated water, how the grey water is kind of reused on site, and how the strategy of water collection also is done. This is the again, we have been doing this over the years. As in India, there was a kind of a sensitivity towards water and the culture of water itself. But if you go back and look at the current system, we need to respect the current topography and look at the water strategies accordingly as well. So this is something which one of the projects which is a very different approach. We're also doing the whole landscape in this whole ravine system. We are implementing this entire big large landscape right now. So the entire idea was retaining the ravine kind of system, which is allowing the streamlets to flow through it, having a very nice canopy walk that goes and respects nature. It's not kind of over the board in terms of ornamental landscape, but really looking at the ecological part of it in the landscape itself. So this is something which again is under construction right now, and the idea was to create this whole 10 acres of self-sustaining forest within a private development, which has a larger kind of it's not entirely private, it's a township, it's a public-private kind of a thing. So something which is evolving as a project itself. At the same time, we are also working in other areas, and this is in Abu Dhabi, where we worked with CBT architects, and it was an international competition that we won against AECOM and very large companies like Surbana and others. So the idea was to again create a water story for a context that was totally different, hot and humid climate in Abu Dhabi. A larger part of it is the desert itself, and how does the whole sea level rise impact, and how do you look at the entire edge condition of the water? This is almost like a 10,000 acres island, which is 1/3 of the city of Abu Dhabi itself. So the entire strategy was to look at it from the ecological perspective of how do you kind of look at the edge from a resiliency perspective of a sea level rise of 1 meter to 3 meter in the future, and kind of create a whole system which will allow for that water to come in and out of the site. So the competition winning entry, it went ahead and it's reached a different stage right now. A part of this island already is opened up for the citizens, and Abu Dhabi is a different world altogether, the pace of project. But yeah, so the idea is that a lot of these systems, you have to think differently. It cannot be a copy-paste solution that one works in one context, other context you cannot just take it and apply it. So something which we are again working in different contexts, different things happen, and how do you kind of adapt to it. One major chunk of this was also this large open space, which was this team had a very big consortium of 8 to 9 specialist consultants. One of them was a transportation consultant who was talking with us of how do you position the open space, and he actually was the one, even though he was a transportation consultant, he suggested that instead of having what we had originally had on the northern side of the island, to move it closer to this particular access point which was there, which would become a larger city amenity itself. So the idea again is that ideas coming from different places, how do they merge together and become one thing? So Sarfaraz, just want to quickly go through the other points.
Yeah, sure. So what was interesting was that, the two edges of the island in the previous plan were treated very differently. So the northern edge was treated as an urban edge, and the southern edge was treated with these mounds and the entire ecological park, essentially to sort of mitigate the storm surge that will happen, right? So in Abu Dhabi, when you're on a coastal side, you talk about storm surges, you talk about ecological design, you talk about softer edges near the sea. When you're in India, you talk about different things. We are doing a project in Bangalore. We are actually reviving the tanks over there, similar to the exercise that similar to the one that we saw in the example. Now we're working in a master plan in Bangalore where our main pitch was this, that, Bangalore is facing major water crisis. So if we within our plan can create these water tanks that are actually flowing into each other and store them for longer, which we used to do very successfully, and that project is actually going ahead. So we have to come up with different strategies depending on what the context is, right? So similarly, when one of the biggest mantras, if you can go ahead, Mahesh, that we stick by, very, very important mantra for us is connect efficiently. So we always show this picture. So this is how we discovered that we can communicate with a lot of clients in India when we talk about history, when we talk about what used to be there, what was good about it, and how can we adapt that and make it more 21st century. So we show them these pictures and say that, in this picture, this is Chandni Chowk, you had room for everyone. You had room for Hathi, Ghoda, Palki, people, everyone else had room on our streets. And if you were to design streets like this in the 21st century, you will have to create room for all the different type of modes that are available. However, unfortunately, currently our cities are only building for this one mode of transportation, which is the car. And that unfortunately has to change, because this is not a sustainable mode at all. If we are growing at the pace that we are growing, we'll have to increase our capacity almost 6 times to accommodate these cars of our existing roads. And it's not going to stop there. It's always going to sort of increase in demand. And there are no cities in the world that actually can suffice enough road for cars. There always will be problems that will arise. So the biggest mantra is to change the whole paradigm. The paradigm is that we design cities for people. We don't design cities for cars, where people come first. You want to move people, you don't want to move cars. And then you sort of deprioritize other areas. You make sure everyone has room on our streets. So, what we do is, if you go next, Mahesh, we essentially sort of demonstrated this on the top left-hand side. We have one of the streets, wide streets in Gurgaon. It's like free for all. There is absolutely no room. It's like if you put like a little goat and a tiger in the same area in a cage, who do you think will win, right? So here in this case, the cars are these dominant people who actually have dominant species in general, who will sort of dominate the entire area if you give them that space. What we need to do is create sort of safe spaces for all different modes to exist. So Hathi, Ghoda, Palki, how will we get them back on our street? Is we have to make room for people to walk, cycle, also vend on our sites, have public transportation, make sure that there is equal access to all sorts of different people, and then make room for all of them on our streets. So this was a version of a 100-meter right-of-way that is so 60-meter right-of-way that is available in Gurgaon on the top left side, to convert that into this. So we have room for open spaces, we have room for trees, we have room for birds, we have room for everyone on these streets. And streets suddenly then become public spaces, correct? That's the idea, that, one of the biggest assets that we can have is to convert our streets to not from being transport, but also public spaces then. So another example that we always show is this project that we did in Dal Lake in Srinagar. We were invited to sort of do a pitch presentation by the transport advisor over there with then government of Jammu and Kashmir. But now the government has changed and all those changes have happened. But the idea was that they were facing challenges with the transportation in general. So what happens is, people from D on this diagram want to travel to A and beyond, right? So the only place that they can come through is this Dal Gate area. And it was actually channelizing all these people to come to Dal Gate. And one mode that they can think of is cars. So they were like, oh, we need to increase the capacity of our roads. That's it. They came with this agenda that we want to build a highway all along Dal Lake. So what we had to do is go back to the drawing board and understand what the problem was. So what we want to do is, we want to connect Nishat and Shalimar Bagh and all these areas to Dal Gate, and also Lal Chowk ahead, because Lal Chowk is the economic generator of the area. And to do that, what are the possibilities that can happen, right? So keep on going next. So what we did was an historic sort of analysis of Dal Lake in general. On the left-hand side, from 16th century onwards to 1940s, you can see the green areas. These are all reclamation areas that have happened within the lake itself, Dal Lake itself. Now, Dal Lake is sort of a hugely ecological sort of asset that the entire city is hinged upon. And what that has done is actually reduced the quality of water. It has reduced the ability of navigation within the entire lake. And keep going ahead. And it's also something that we discovered on the way was, if you go to the next page, Mahesh, discovered was a lot of people used to commute using the lake itself. And it's a cultural thing that actually was prevalent. And Shikara story, right? It used to be, something of Venice of the East sort of a situation where people used to commute using shikaras. And not only that, Dal Lake actually has an important ecological connection with the surrounding hills. So you have all these water and streams and everything that empty into Dal. That's what makes Dal a collection bowl. And the challenge that we posed in front of them was that if you build a massive highway all along the coast, you'll actually destroy these natural systems in a very big way. So we showed them a solution, an alternative, which was about introducing public transport, and have around 40 buses per hour sort of a capacity to make sure that you don't have to reclaim any more of the lake for constructing roads, but you can actually create really, really high quality open spaces along it and revive the old culture of boating through the area. We worked with Ola, and they expressed interest in actually starting boats all along Dal, and it is something that is going to be the future. This is a sustainable mode which we've done for centuries, probably something that we can work on. And we showed them a vision that you convert these areas that are about transportation. You take different approaches. You use water transport, revive it, to actually construct high quality public transit, and then you build these networks of cycling and walking networks that would actually make transportation easy. Similarly, Shalimar Bagh, which has lost its connection with Dal Lake, we presented ideas of how can we revive it and connect it back to the lake through urban regeneration. And this was extremely well received. So what happened was that there was a big change. And obviously, you make this entire system very smart. You have to bring 21st century ideas to the table of how will they commute, how will people be able to now relate to it. And the idea was, how do we move people instead of only cars, right? So, and then this project was extremely successful. They were developing the ghats to actually revive the whole boat network within the lake. And the big massive reclamation of the Dal Lake itself was then stopped as a project. Because they saw the value in the alternate proposal, saying that, why don't we work with our nature, we work with our context in that manner. So next. And then we always have this, the third mantra is always have intelligent infrastructure. Let's plan for intelligent infrastructure. So we tell them the story of Dholavira, 4,000-year-old, 4,000 BC. The development was 4,000 BC. It could actually sustain four drought seasons. It had enough water stored in its area within an arid climate that it could sustain 4 drought seasons. The storm water and the sewage was independent of each other in these tunnels and drains, was intelligently worked out. And what's happening to infrastructure today, that we if you look at that, we actually are not building very intelligently today. We can learn so much from this 4,000-year-old settlement. Go next, Mahesh. The state of our infrastructure is this. All we do is, the old channels that used to be there, we put sewage in that, we put kachra in that, we put everything in one area, because we are not thinking long term, we are not planning for it, we are not actually investing in intelligent infrastructure as yet. We've started, but we need to make huge strides in these areas, right? So this was a plan that we worked with the city of Naya Raipur. The city of Naya Raipur wanted to develop a master plan for the entire urban drainage of the city. So we went ahead and go next, keep going fast. We developed it based on sustainable urban drainage system. So these are the streams on site. You can actually see what the streams are like. We divided the entire city into 3 zones. We said, okay, one is near the airport, then the city, and then afterwards. So what we want to do is, all the water that comes, we need to slow it down. We need to make sure there is enough plantation and natural vegetation that would clean it as a natural process. Make it accessible to people. Then when the stream goes through the city, you actually make the stream more interactive. It could become places where it becomes a social hub. So the streets are the fronts. Now the canals will actually become the fronts of the entire city. We have public spaces, we have amenities that are on the canal. And then afterwards, when the water leaves the city and goes towards the river, you actually conserve the land by actually making sure that you, again, sort of complement the agriculture that is happening outside the city by actually providing aquaculture, other areas and things like that, where it is more about conserving and preserving the landscape of the entire area, right? So we came up with this plan where we developed a whole network of a stormwater system. Now, this is working with an engineering firm who is working on the stormwater network, then converting it into a landscape project, and eventually it became an urban design project, because now this also provides alternative transport connectivity through the entire city. Now you can cycle from one area to the other. On the way, you can have your coffee with at the social hubs, or you could stop and meet people. Suddenly, the backyard, which used to be the nala, has now become the front yard. And while doing this, we're actually conserving water and making sure it's sort of this 21st century city, which is water self-sufficient and also has all the, the livability factors that would make it attractive for people to come and live here. Keep going next. So we presented this vision to them, saying that, it's not about putting concrete along our rivers anymore. It's about making sure they're green. It's about making sure the ecology survives. It's about making sure that, it's a biodiversity corridor that will actually enrich the entire city. So again, we demonstrated in a 2.5 kilometer stream length that we could create this massive asset for the entire site, which would be a 62-acre public forest area, which would have streams and play areas and amazing sort of open spaces that will make the city even more livable, right? Now I'd like Mansi to take up, a couple of more of these.
Yeah. Thanks. So one of the questions that comes to us as urban designers, and one of our core principles is, keeping true to the human scale. And that means that you don't really worry about how the building looks like, but you really worry about how the building feels and what kind of environment it creates and what kind of social interactions it can provide. So we had a client that came to us and said that I would like to challenge the way universities are made in India, and because a lot of them follow very modern architecture and they're all very intimidating. I would like to create a training center which is based on the scale of villages, where a person does not feel overpowered by the architecture, but it allows for spaces. So, and also, so this was a project that we did with Vandana Ranjit Singh and Designing as a consortium. It was a competition that we took part in. So yeah, this is what the master plan looked like. And when we first presented it in the competition, everybody was really worried that this looks very cluttered and why does it look so busy, and it's not clean, and why is there so much happening? And we had to sort of tell them that this is because it was based in Jaipur, and the whole reason was that we wanted to create streets and also chalks and also an aranya of sorts that became the open space. And we had a central area that we call the Baudi, because the way the water was flowing, everything was flowing inside the Baudi, and instead of having a normal amphitheater, the Baudi became the community space that sort of changed seasons. So the idea was that chalks became the large halls and where people would sit. And also the training university was for adults. It was not for like young people. It was for people who were already in their 40s and 50s. So it was about having spaces for interaction. We also created the idea of street inside a campus by creating these little kiosks called dukans, which would be learning dukans for different NGOs that would come and have different seminars or things that are keep going on. It becomes an avenue for that. And we had different kind of chalks, which are learning chalks for different kind of facilities. We had dining chalks instead of a dining hall where people were eating in khatiyas. We had chai chalks, which are right outside the each cluster of classroom had a chai chalk where everybody would come back for a break of chai and conversation. And then obviously we had to take the same language into the living and the hostel camp area also. So the hostel was also designed taking inspiration from a lot of Rajasthan villages on how they are so close to each other. They are high density, low rise architecture sort of clusters. And when you go in, the gullies sort of take you to different places. And as a cluster, so everybody was coming here in a training batch of 40. Just like I guess your each batch would be of 40 or 50 people. So each of these housing clusters were made to design for a batch of 40, so that when you would come to train with a batch of 40, you would also live with them. And this is where you have informal conversations and you have a chat. And the thing that connects you again is like this main street, which again, as a program of the university, would come alive with different sort of. I love this view because this is what the idea was. If you see on the left hand side, there's this man in a dhoti wearing VR glasses. And that's what this was for. It was a campus for training of the teachers of municipal schools of the villages of all over India. And we had to upgrade, the training was to upgrade their skills so that they can become better teachers and principals, and also create that sense of education amongst the kids. The section of the Bowery was inspired by an actual Bowery, but instead instead of making like a normal amphitheater, we had buildings that were going in. We had a space. If you go next, the Bowery was meant to be something that changes season. Whenever it would rain, it would become the area for collection of water. Whenever you would have a large sort of coronation ceremony or something, this would be the space where everybody would come. Or on an evening, if you would want to have a conversation one-on-one with someone, this is where you go. And because it was so large, and you could have different clusters of people going inside. So it was really, we called it the Seasons of Bowery. And that one open space, instead of being like a lawn or like a large area which would be hot, we've made it more recessed, more shaded, something that had collected water, and it became more livable as a space. Go next. And then this was something that also was a challenge to us when we were also designing a project in Abu Dhabi, where the same human scale question came to us. Now, if you see, the older cities are actually designed with a lot of intersections, and when you walk, you can go left and right, and so basically there are around 580 intersections that are there within a square kilometer. When you go to more planned areas like Los Angeles, that reduces to 58. If you actually go to Irvine, which is a more suburban area, it reduces to 6. And what that means is that you have to walk that much more to come to an intersection. So when we were doing a project in Abu Dhabi for Masdar City with CBT Architects, this was a question that we had raised, where the plot sizes were already very big. And what we wanted to do was create these sikkas. So sikkas are like gullies in Arab, which are like shared streets just for pedestrians. And we wanted to break the plots into smaller plots, and then also have these smaller courtyards, and then have clusters. So by doing that, can you go next? We started having spaces like this that was part of a larger parcel, but allowed for people to sort of freely walk through, to know each other. It was also safer because if something were to happen, you had enough people looking into these areas, and also a lot of children could know each other, and a lot of community that could happen. So these are some strategies that we do as part of the human-centric design, where you actually think about putting yourself in a space, not just as a human, but as sometimes I put myself as a woman, and I see that, is this space going to be safe for me at 11 o'clock in the night, or will I actually leave a child on their own, or will I have to hold the child's hand? Those are all sort of questions that we often ask ourselves for different kind of projects. Can you go next, Mahesh?
So just to add to this plan was for phase 2 of Mazda that won the AIA Urban Design. Then Masdar hired the same consortium again in 2017, and we did another phase for phase 4. Even that won an award for the AI Award for Excellence in 2018. So really, really proud about 2 projects, but it's mainly because the team was fantastic, right? We had consultants and a lot of collaboration.
And a lot of the conversation was about how do you make a space more interactive. It was not like, because it's in Abu Dhabi, it's going to be a different cultural space from India or anything. So ultimately, globally, as humans, we are the same. We feel unsafe in similar situations. We feel safe in similar situations. We enjoy similar situations. So it wasn't really about, Rajasthan or Abu Dhabi. It was really putting, and this is what Mahesh was saying, that each of our characteristics sort of came. And that's why it was important to have different experts on the table and also different humans at the table, because they all got in their 2 cents and said that if I were to leave my child here because my child is so naughty, I need a safer space, because he would just like run off. So how do you design for that, or how do you have a conversation about designing spaces for that? So this was a great project. If you go next. Invest strategically is one of the mantra, because if you see Varanasi, this is a painting, and Varanasi is one of the oldest cities in India, and you see it's really, really built. But what a lot of people miss out, if you go next, is Mesh, go next, is that while one side of the Varanasi is really, really built, there is a big smile on the other side, which allows for the river to sort of take its natural course and allows for it to expand and contract. Because being Ganges has its own mind. It decides to go from one side to the other, and that space allows for that to happen. So when we are talking about invest strategically, we are talking about how do you build, where do you build if you are doing a project, and where do you not build. A lot of the times the question is, as urban designers, we have to put our fingers down and say, do not build here, or do not pour concrete here, or this is a living system that exists, so do not disturb it. So we were working on a project in Amravati, in Vijayawada, for 7 islands, and one of the islands that the tourism department wanted us to work on was called Bhavani Island. If you go to Vijayawada, you can take a boat here and go. And one of the main things that we had to do, can you go next, Mahesh, while doing this island was to let the river, because they are river islands, we wanted the edges to be floodable. We did not want to ever define the edge, because even when we started working, it was so difficult for us to, get an actual boundary of the river, because it kept changing every time the survey was done. So we designed actual edges that allow for this flooding to happen, which allow for sedimentation to happen, and landscapes that are very, very similar to what naturally exists. Go next. Also, in the center, we had a strategy on how do you create a mobility corridor in the center. So you still allow people to program it, but you don't build and, destroy the natural way the river moves. Go next. We had to fight a lot, but we made a case against, they wanted to have a golf course here, but instead we were able to convince them to create a natural, forest or a wetland park that would allow for things to happen. So what invest strategically also means, go next, is basically, this is a photograph of VT station. I mean, it doesn't look like this. It's starting to look like this now.
Churchgate. Yeah, it's Churchgate.
Churchgate station. And long ago, somebody built a very, very big station, right? If you go next, after so many of years, even in 2000, this is a picture of 2010, we can now have a 2020, where it is starting to again service so many more people. So the stations that were public infrastructure, when you did invest in